Hey guys, it's Mandy. You know I love Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, and one of the things I love the most is they're always doing new things. And I recently tried their new sports massage, and I've got to tell you, it's incredible. So you know I'm active and I'm always focused on wellness, and this is just one more thing that I am adding in to my routine because now I'm hooked. They use the Theragun, which of course is going to help increase blood flow to certain areas and muscles that might be sore or tired or need attention, but you also get to add on another upgrade. You know, whenever I was there, I chose to go ahead and do the cup gliding as well as the hot stones. They work really well with the Theragun, maybe like a triple threat. Definitely ask for it the next time you go in to Hand and Stone. Ask about the sports massage. You can book your appointment today online at handandstonetyler.com, or you can stop by and see them. They're located in South Tyler in the Cumberland Shopping Center. Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, hosted by Mandee Montana, a podcast that celebrates women, their stories, their struggles, and ability to overcome. Conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, and courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast, presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. With over 20 massage therapists and 6 estheticians, certified and trained in multiple protocols, you can get an affordable massage or facial located right here in the East Texas area. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Mandee Montana, and we are on the road today. We are in the home of our dear friend Carleen, and I have my dear friend Kathy Williams Bosley here as well. And you might recall a recent episode where Kathy and I talked about going soberish for this summer. Kathy and I both have been making some healthy choices around how much we're drinking, and our friend Carleen happens to be a wine expert. And so we decided if we were going to make some healthier choices about wine, we should probably educate ourselves. So Carleen has graciously invited us into her home to have wine and some food that is expertly paired with it. So Carleen, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me on your podcast again. This is so fun. So thank you.
I'm so excited. I've never known anything about wines, pairing them, the flavoring, any of the things. And so I cannot wait to see what Carleen is going to teach me.
Well, this kind of came from a happy hour that we were at with some friends. And Carleen started explaining some stuff to us, and we were all in a very festive mood, and I was not paying attention. I was acting like a silly teenager, but I knew some really great information was coming about, and I thought, you know what? If I'm curious about this, maybe my listeners will be too. And Kathy was asking some great questions because she doesn't drink quite as much wine as Carleen and I do, and so I thought this will be so fun. Let's just record it. So I know you've prepared quite a lot for us, Carleen. Where do you want to start?
Wow. Well, I want to start. Thank you so much for all that intro. So I kind of want to start with what you mentioned about trying to be healthy and make better choices. Mm-hmm. And sugar is a big part of the conversation now about wine.
That's one of the number one reasons I tell people that I don't want to drink much wine. I say, the sugar and the weight and all the things.
Yes.
So yes.
And as it pertains to sugar, not all wines are created equally. And there are some interesting misconceptions that people have about wine and about sugar. And first of all, we know that wine is made from grapes. All grapes are fruit. All fruit has some sort of natural sugar. What people don't always know, and why would you? Because typically we just buy what we like and drink it. The process of making wine eliminates sugar. So what happens in the fermentation process is the yeast that is added to the juice goes in like a little Pac-Man, and it starts eating all of the sugar molecules, and that produces carbon dioxide and alcohol.
I had no idea.
Yes. So you hear people talk about sweet wines, dry wines. When something is considered dry, that means that it does not taste sweet. There is not residual sugar or added sugar. And so residual sugar happens when, typically in the fermentation process, when the yeast is done, there's no more sugar for it to eat, it dies. And it settles to the bottom, and then when they do the next phase of the fermentation process, all those yeasts are left behind, and there is no sugar in the wine. But sometimes if a winemaker wants a wine to be sweet, a lot of varietals lend themselves better to sweet wines, the winemaker can add some pure alcohol, which will kill the yeast immediately and stop that process, so it leaves sugar. And then the sneaky thing that what a lot of winemakers and wineries don't talk about is that there are some wines that they add sugar. There's a lot of added sugar, and we can blame our culture for that. If you look at what's on the grocery store shelves, you are very hard pressed. If you're not on the perimeter of the store, you are very hard pressed to find things that do not have sugar. So what people have found is the American palate wants that sugar. Even if you don't know it, you might drink a wine and think, well, this isn't sweet at all, but there's sugar in there. So why doesn't it taste sweet? Well, wine is naturally acidic and it's naturally tannic if it's a red. So those things balance out and somewhat mask the sugar. So when you do the process of actually tasting and learning what you like, as opposed to just drinking wine, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about. I love the act of tasting wine, which is very different than the act of drinking wine.
I was so clueless just watching you. That's what started everything that night was you, the way, and I everyone does it. So they do the whole pretend to swirl it and put it in their mind, the whole taste it and smell it. So I was asking you and going through the whole process of that. And you're right. Like naturally I go for a sweet wine. I have since I was much younger and started drinking at a younger age. And that was just what I thought it was supposed to taste like. And then listening to you describe it all that night. And then I think I even tasted what y'all were drinking that night. Totally different experience. Opened my taste palettes, my mind to all the things you were explaining.
Yes. And the other thing that you did was instead of just taking a drink and saying, I like that or I don't like that, you stopped and you took a small sip and you thought about what was happening in your mouth. And to me, that's what is so important for people to do, especially if you're new on your journey for wine, or even if you're not. Sometimes people know what they like, but they don't know why they like it. And if you can make yourself slow down, savor it, small sips, stop and think about it. What am I tasting in here? What do I like about this and what don't I like about this? And sometimes it's hard to put that into words if you don't know all the wine terminology, but that's okay. You can say, this wine tastes like the grass clippings that I just mowed my yard from this morning, and I like that, or I don't like that, and that's okay. You will hear sommeliers say, I'm getting freshly mown grass in this wine. There are some wines, a lot of whites will have that. So it's okay. You don't have to know any wine terms. If you can stop and say, is there anything that's coming into my mind that I taste? And then you can catalog, do I like that? Do I not like that? And then and over time you'll start to learn, okay, that's what this is. I don't like things like this. Like I will give you an example, and I do not mean to hate on a specific brand, but I can't help myself. So there's a very popular red wine. The label is Josh. I don't think all of their wines have this problem, but their Cabernet Sauvignon, it's about $12 a bottle in the store, $12.99, depending on where you buy it, anywhere from $10 to $15 in the store. Super accessible. It is mass produced. And if you think about the state of California and how many grapes can be grown and what can be made into wine, and the quality control for the really good places like Napa, Sonoma, how can you make a wine with really good grapes that's going to sit on every single grocery store shelf in America? So they have to, because Cabernet Sauvignon is very in vogue right now, it's very mass produced. They have to be able to turn out a lot of cases of it. So a lot of winemakers, for their mass-produced wines, will add chemicals and flavorings and sugar and different things to try to mimic certain tastes. So what you're getting is a very processed food. And to give you an example of the difference, we're gonna taste this here in a little bit, this Josh Cabernet, and you are probably not gonna say, wow, that tastes sweet to me. You're not, because it's meant to be dry. It's a Cabernet. It's hidden. They call that residual sugar or added sugar, depending. I don't know if he stops the fermentation process. Looking at the alcohol by volume, I doubt it. I believe there's added sugar. I don't know this, but I do know from the wine spec sheets, there is 5 to 6 grams per liter of sugar in a bottle of Josh. And let's contrast that to one of my favorite wineries in Napa. Is called Ghost Block. And they have a Cabernet that is 1/2 of 1 gram per liter of sugar.
That's significantly different.
10 to 12 times as much sugar in this glass of Cab. Now, granted, that's an $85 bottle of Cab, but you can buy a Cabernet that is not $85 a bottle that does not have 5 to 6 grams of sugar per liter.
My mind just went to the whole, like you were talking about eating the perimeter of the grocery store too. My mind just went to about 2 years now. I have really tried to cut all the processed sugar out of my palate, but you have to do that. Your mouth has to get used to not tasting that processed sugar flavor. And so I love this challenge of my mouth starting to take on the taste of healthy wines that don't have the added sugar. You're just making this sound so exciting, and you just made it so easy for me to not even consider, because that's the very reason I was stepping away from wine.
Pro tip, don't ever buy wine off the bottom shelf. If you are not wanting sugar, additives, added chemicals, just don't look at the bottom shelf of the grocery store. It's the cheapest stuff. That's where you find your yellowtail, and you think about it, they're shipping that stuff all over the world.
I see it at every grocery store.
Australian wine, isn't
yes,
it?
and to let you know, a yellowtail Chardonnay has twice as much sugar in it as a glass of Josh Cabernet.
Really?
12 grams per liter.
Okay, so now I'm also starting to understand why a good bottle of wine is so expensive as well. It's worth it.
It is much more pure. There is a lot more care taken. It is made for people who want to savor wine, not for the masses who
might be guzzling it or to feel a certain way.
And a lot of people like sweet wine, and that's okay. Yeah. There are some really high quality sweet wines. And so if somebody says, I really only like sweet wines, I'm going to say, okay, you can drink a Moscato. That's usually where a lot of people start. You could graduate to a Gewürztraminer or Gewürzheimer, if my German friend.
German?
Yes, it is a German wine.
I have some friends that like that. It's not particularly my favorite, but it's because I've been drinking dry wine for so long.
Yes.
That it feels a little funky to have the sweet now.
Yes, and it's not as sweet as a Moscato, but it's definitely on that sweeter range. And Rieslings, you have to be careful for, because Rieslings can be made sweet or dry. So if it says dry Riesling, it's not going to be as sweet. So, but if it doesn't say dry Riesling, it's most likely going to be sweet, especially if it's grown in a warmer climate. Warmer climate wines will produce grapes that have higher sugar in the beginning. So you're either going to get more residual sugar or notes of it, or you're going to have a higher alcohol content, because the yeast keeps eating until all the sugar is gone, and the more sugar in a grape, the higher the alcohol content. A great example of that in a red is a red Zinfandel. We've all drank white Zinfandel out of a box. That was my entry into wine. I'm not hating on it. It is a huge industry that fuels the wine industry and allows it to make the really, really good ones that I love. But a red Zinfandel is not nearly as sweet as a white Zinfandel. Same grape. They just leave the skins on when they make the wine. And so it keeps more structure. It keeps those tannins, and it gets the color and more body to it. It has a lot more sugar than a Cabernet Sauvignon grape. So if you look at the back of a bottle of Zinfandel, a red Zin, you're going to find that it's probably 2 to 3%, sometimes more, higher alcohol by volume percentage than a Cabernet Sauvignon. And if you get a late harvest Zinfandel, you can add another point or two, because that means they left the grapes on longer, which means they developed more sugar.
So besides just not getting my wine off the bottom shelf, I'm also going to be reading the label, just like we've been all starting to do with our foods the last couple of years as well. So now you're giving some great tips that help me know what to look for on those labels. I love that.
Yes, and the wineries are not required to put all the same nutrition information that a lot of our food has. You will see an alcohol by volume. You will see where the grapes come from. You'll see certain things. But the Google is an amazing place. A lot of wineries create a tech sheet for their wines. Cool. Not all. Some you cannot find, but you can find tech sheets on a lot of them that will, and some wine retailers, either e-retailers or brick and mortar retailers, will test the wines for sugar, and they'll post on their websites how much sugar, so you can get to know. And so for me, like the Josh, it'll be interesting to see if you guys go, oh, that tastes sweet to me, because I don't want to sway your opinion. I already probably kind of have. But for me, I've noticed over time what I'm finally recognizing as sweet. And I'll say, gosh, this tastes so sweet. And somebody goes, that doesn't taste sweet to me. But I know what residual sugar in wine now does
You've been
for me,
tasting
for my
and
palate.
learning about all of this, though,
Yes.
and talk about a little bit about your journey there, because obviously you're knowledgeable. Kathy and I know that you lived in California for several years, and that you had an opportunity to go to Napa countless times.
Yes.
We really don't know the number, and that you've enjoyed pairing wine and food, but you've also been on an educational journey for the last few months.
I have, yes. And so I've been a wine nerd for a very long time. When I moved out to California, I instantly fell in love with the relationship between wine and food and what they do to each other and how they change and complement each other sometimes, and then sometimes how they really don't, how they can be opposed to each other. And I've always been fascinated by that. And it's been a dream of mine to actually have some formal education in wine. And so my sweet darling husband encouraged me several months ago, just do it. You've always wanted to do it, just do it. So I enrolled in the Wine and Spirits Education Trust course for wine and spirits education. It is a sommelier course, for lack of a better term, and I have completed and passed level 1 test. I start level 2 in a couple of weeks. So typically a sommelier is someone who works in a restaurant to help people select wines. I clearly don't work in a restaurant, but I've always had dreams of doing something fun with wine. And so to be able to speak about it, if people are going to people ask me questions all the time because they know I'm a wine nerd. I thought, the responsible thing to do would be to actually know what I'm talking about.
Not just instincts,
That's
but
right.
to have the education.
To have the science. And one of the really fun things, probably my favorite thing that I've learned so far that I hadn't learned over the course of time, asking every winemaker that I meet a bazillion questions until they're like, okay, lady, I've got other people to talk to here, is learning the science behind what food and wine, what that relationship is and what it is that influences those flavors. And
well, that's you, though. That's what I think of. You say you aren't in charge of a restaurant, but you are, because your kitchen is such a restaurant. You are so happy in the kitchen making some yummy food that's going to make the people in the kitchen happy. And then now you're going to pair it with the right taste of wine. And so you really are. You're running Carleen's restaurant in her house every day. And it's just, it makes people feel so good to enjoy the whole meal, including the wine. So yes, you are.
Thank you. That I do serve wine when I have people over. That's for sure.
And we enjoy it.
And now we know why.
We're learning why we enjoy it.
Yes,
now,
yes.
though.
And we know why and how it pairs. And I mean, from here on out, I promise you, every time I eat anything at your house and there's a wine offered, I'm definitely going to say, well, Carleen, what would you recommend? I mean, and then I'm going to get this neat story and backstory behind that wine and that pairing and how they go together. And I can't wait. I'm excited.
It'll be fun, right?
Yeah.
It'll be fun. So for those people who do like sweet, I mentioned a couple of varietals. There are also some things you can do with food if you want to accentuate the sweetness. Say you have been served a wine that is not very sweet. It's not sweet enough for you, and you would like for it to taste a little more sweet. There's something you can do, and that would be to choose foods that are salty or acidic, because those things are going to minimize any bitterness that might be in the wine, and they're going to bring out the fruit flavors. And if it's salty, it will bring out a little bit more of the sweet flavors. And if it's acidic, it'll just bring out fruit. And a lot of times people confuse fruit with sweet. You'll smell, say you have a great New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc that you're getting notes of floral and citrus and green apple, and you taste those, but it doesn't have sugar. It's not a sweet wine at all, but you're tasting the fruit. So sometimes your mind will put those two things together. So eating salty and acidic foods will enhance fruit flavors and sometimes sweet flavors, so that if you like sweet, you can do that. Now, on the other side of the equation, I've talked to the people who do like sweet wine, and maybe they don't want the sugar, so they want to start learning to drink wines that aren't as sweet. So I say pair salty foods and acidic foods with them. You can also pair foods that are really umami with a wine that's maybe too dry for you that you wish.
Word you just
So
said?
umami is like, what are they calling it? The fifth or the sixth taste bud taste? I don't know. But think of mushrooms, beef, things that have this very savory.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
And
I'm
kind
going
of
there in my
deep
mouth right
and
now.
strong and savory note. Actually, in front of you is some brie cheese. Brie cheese is also umami.
Okay.
So what it's going to do is it will kind of neutralize and balance all the flavors. So if you're like, I'm not loving this wine, but I really have to drink it, or I want to learn to love it, eat it with a burger.
Okay.
Eat it with mushroom risotto. Because the other thing that will go on there is the fats in burgers, in risotto, working with those umami, those earthy umami flavors are going to kind of balance out a wine where no one flavor profile sticks out. Because all wines are a little acidic. A lot of wines have a bitter note to them, differing levels of sweetness, tannins if it's red. There are different things going on there, and those high umami foods will sometimes mask any strong flavors. Now, if somebody's opening you a $100 bottle of something really fancy from Napa, you can have a burger with it, but you're going to miss nuance. You're going to miss the nuances because that umami flavor is going to overpower some of the notes in the wine.
Okay.
So, fun fact.
Good to know.
Yes. So if you're trying to avoid the sugar, some of the varietals to look for, especially if you want to get off of I always drink Cab, I want to do something else, try a Nebbiolo. It is an Italian varietal that is very dry.
Say that word one more time.
A Nebbiolo.
Nebbiolo.
You can also look for a Bordeaux, which is a French wine from a very specific region. It's almost always a blend of Cabernet Merlot, potentially Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec also, depending. So those will tend to balance out other flavors. So if you don't like a really strong tannin that's in a Cabernet, having Merlot and Malbec that are much less tannic will balance those things out. And of course, Cabernet Sauvignon is not typically sweet. Also, my husband and I drink a lot of Tempranillos. That's a Spanish grape.
I like that one.
And it's a milder.
Oh, that sounds fun.
It's less tannic than a Cabernet. It's slightly less dry, super smooth. And
When you're saying tannic and tannin,
yes.
what does that equal to in my lack of wine vocabulary?
Have you ever taken a drink of a red wine and you're like, my tongue is almost sticking to the roof of my mouth and my mouth feels kind of dry on the sides of my tongue or on the top of my mouth?
Yes.
Those are the tannins. Tannins are a compound that live in the skins of the grapes and also live in the seeds of the grapes, and it gives wine structure and body and dryness.
Okay.
So it balances acidity because all wine grapes are full of acid, and so tannins work with acidity and the natural sugar in the fermentation process to kind of balance out a wine. But different winemakers like different things. Some people love the tannins. Some people don't love the tannins. So you're looking
So they're
for,
tweaking that to make a
They
balance
are.
so that each one has a different level of that and therefore a different effect on your mouth.
Yes.
Is that what I sometimes see as the residue in the bottom of a glass?
That is sediment.
That is
That
sediment.
happens over time.
Okay, and that's if you've been saving a bottle for a long time. That's you're going to find that at the bottom. Okay, different
Yes.
question for a different
Yes,
class.
that's
probably.
great. And that doesn't hurt you. It just
Yeah.
feels funky in your mouth. And so
Yeah.
I just like stick it through a coffee filter or something. Or if you have a Venturi, they have little screens that'll catch the sediment. So white lovers, if you're a white wine lover and you are trying to get away from the sugar, your driest white wines are going to be your Sauvignon Blancs, your Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigios. And those are super light, lower alcohol content. That is such an easy to drink wine, and it is typically not sweet. It might be fruity, but it's not going to be sweet. It's not high in sugar. If you want to drink a Chardonnay and you're trying to get away from the sugar, go for cooler climate Chardonnays because they tend to be more crisp and acidic and less sweet.
So
And
were you looking at the region where the wine is
I was
from?
going to say, give an example. Like
are.
where
It's like Washington.
Burgundy,
Okay.
Northern Italy, you're looking for Champagne, Sonoma Coast.
Okay.
So like if you have a southern Napa, like a Napa Valley Chardonnay, it's probably going to be aged in oak, slightly warmer climate because it's away from the coast. It is going to have possibly a little more sugar. It's going to have some sweeter notes. Whereas if you go Sonoma County, Sonoma Coast, it's that coastal, the cool air that comes in off the ocean is going to keep that Chardonnay from developing as much of sugar.
Oh,
So much
that's
of
interesting.
sugar. That's
Yeah, I
not
was gonna say, that and geography and just
know.
all of it rolled into one. I
Because
had
there's
no idea.
fog and there's things like that. So the sun isn't developing as much sugar in the grape. New Zealand is also a great place for some cooler climate Chardonnays. And Willamette Valley. People think of Pinot Noirs from Willamette Valley up in Oregon, but they make great dry Chardonnays as well.
None
and
of
then
this.
sparkling.
I feel like I'm having a whole, like all the school lessons in
Right?
one time. This is so intriguing to me. I love it.
Yeah, fun. And sparklings. But look for Brut or Extra Brut or Brut Nature.
And that's you sparkling like
Yes.
champagne or prosecco.
Or Prosecco or Cava. If it says dry, I know this is the one weird thing. Champagne has its own set of designations. If it says dry, it's actually going to be sweeter than a Brut.
Really?
So you want to go Brut or Brut something.
Okay.
Extra Brut, Brut Nature, something like that. Those are your very driest, your least amount of sugars in your sparklings.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I also we talked about foods that would enhance sweetness. I wanted to give you guys, and we talked about the umami that will kind of diminish it, but other food notes, things to note that a sweet wine typically goes pretty good with spicy food. The sugar in it will balance out the spice, and the spice will actually make a wine, it will accentuate the heat in the pepper. It will make the wine taste a little less sweet.
Oh.
So that's another tip for you, because your tongue is figuring out what to do with this heat that you just got. So that's a fun idea. And then fatty, oily foods, because they'll coat the mouth, and they will tamp down flavors that the acid. It will tamp down acidic flavors. So acid will sometimes overpower sweet. So anyway, fun. And on the tannins, if you don't like the tannins, if you find a wine you're like, this makes my mouth feel funky, I don't like that, that tastes bitter to me, you can eat something salty, like grab a thing of popcorn, because the salt in the popcorn will cut through that tannin, and it will bring out what elements of sweet and fruit there are in the wine, and will tamp down that bitter, dry thing. So just some tips.
Nice.
I want to grab the both of you, get on an airplane, and go to one of these
Napa?
places.
Yeah.
To Napa or to New Zealand or any of them.
Sure, let's go.
And try all of them. So I'm looking forward to using this knowledge and playing around with it and getting more educated, so that I know what to choose whenever I'm eating and I'm trying to make a really healthy wine choice.
Yeah. Super fun. Also, pizza is great because it usually has acid from the tomato sauce. There's usually some salt. And if there's fatty meats.
So what would you pair with my favorite pizza if I give you the toppings? Okay. Can we play this game real quick?
Okay. Thinking cap on.
If I'm typically order a pepperoni, mushroom, and black olive pizza, of course, it's going to have the tomato sauce and the cheese and the crust, all that as well. What would you pair with that as far as wine?
So what kind of wine flavor what is it in wine that you like the most?
Ooh, that's a good question. I usually like a drier wine that has a smoother texture.
So a Bordeaux would be lovely. And the meats in that pizza and the acid from the tomato sauce are going to kind of cut whatever tannins might be in there. And if you like something super smooth, a Bordeaux is going to be great with that. You can also go with the Chianti.
Okay.
From Italy. It's made from the Sangiovese grape. It tends to be a little more acidic and it can be tangy, but paired with pizza, the acids are going to complement in the sauce, and then the oil is going to kind of coat your mouth, and so it's going to balance out that wine with that pizza.
I had that several times, both trips to Italy that I went on, when we would have spaghetti or lasagna or whatever with the tomato sauces, which I love. My husband, Aaron, was recommending that we just grab a bottle of Chianti. It's very accessible there as well, which is helpful. But it always tasted lovely. So it's good to know that there's science behind he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, it sounded like you were going to your whole Italian palate flavor. So I was going to ask, I was going to go over to a more Mexican spicy flavoring. Because I love a Mexican palate. Is there you mentioned a wine earlier that was a Spanish wine. Is there a certain sort of flavor that you go with whenever you're...
I love to drink a Tempranillo.
That's the one you were talking
Mexican
about earlier.
Food. Yes.
Okay. Yes. I can't wait to do. I've never heard of that wine or tried it, and that just sounds fun to me.
You will often see it on the shelf as a Rioja. Rioja is the region of Spain that it's grown in.
Okay.
And different countries have different ways of labeling. A lot of the European wines, they label it by the area that it's grown in, the growing region, whereas we label it by the type of grape or the name of the wine. So like ours will say Cabernet Sauvignon, and then underneath it might say California or Napa Valley or whatever. Whereas in Europe, you're going to see Rioja, and then you turn it over on the back and you're going to see that it's maybe 85% Tempranillo grape and 15% Syrah or whatever. And so Tempranillo is the actual varietal of grape and kind of wine, but the label's going to say Rioja. And there are some really great Riojas you can buy that are very affordable here.
Oh, nice.
We have one that we buy at Sam's for like $10 or $12 that's surprisingly good, and I don't get the sweet notes. The United States puts a lot of regulations on the wine industry that drive our pricing up. I've been studying this in my wine education. Why can I buy a bottle of wine that's $10 cheaper that had to get on a boat to come over here and taste better than something that I bought for $10 more that came from California? Why is that? And so they often are adhering. They also have a lot of standards they have to adhere to be able to put the label on it in Europe. It's a little bit different over here. So, and I'm sure they make their cheap stuff that's mass produced, but you find those and you go, okay, I won't buy that again. But yeah. But you can find some surprisingly great import wines that you'd be surprised at how good they are versus how much they cost.
Well, I have this question for you. You have a spread in front of us that is incredible. Do you want us to talk about some of this on the podcast, or do you want us to enjoy this and you share on your social media later and I include that in the show notes? How would you like to talk about the pairing of the food and the wine that you have in front of us tonight?
Well, I did bring out one sweet wine just because in case you were like, I kind of like the sweet, I just don't want the sugar, but also to see what sweet wines do with different foods. But then we could skip that if we want. I also have us a good citrusy Sauvignon Blanc, which is a drier white that I find them to be very refreshing and lovely. And then I have 2 California Cabernets. I have our bottle of Josh that we talked about. That's your $10 to $15 bottle of wine. But I also have a bottle of Justin, which comes from a different region in the state. It tends to be, depending on where you buy it, it could be anywhere from $20 to $30. But it's interesting, the difference. To me, like, I'm happy to pay $10 or $12 more for this versus that. So, and then I brought a variety of cheeses. I have some sweet foods, like I have grapes, I have some dried cherries, I have some dark chocolate, and then I have some sweet milk chocolate. I did prosciutto and melon because to specifically pair with, say, our Sauvignon Blanc, and then also our Cabernet to see what it does, because here you've got some sweet and you've got some umami and some fatty oily. You know, there's a reason that there is a thing that is charcuterie is almost always served with wine, because the fats and the oils and the umami in those meats and cheeses are great with certain kinds of wine. So, and then I made us a caprese because, again, we've got acid in there, and I've got some capers, some balsamic capers here, so you can see, because real world, like, okay, I want to eat something salty. Well, how do you classify something that has multiple flavors in it? So this is something that has that salty, briny caper, plus the mozzarella cheese that's got more of that fat oil, and then the acidity from the tomatoes and what that does with the different wines. Because I want you to see what each one does with each wine and go, oh, well, that's interesting.
So you mentioned the Josh wine. Can we maybe try that and then do the pairing, or bring a sampler around to us so that we have something to kind of close out with today?
Yes, for sure. I would love to do that. And fun fact, by the way, as I'm pouring this, so I actually just learned this not terribly long ago, that Cabernet Sauvignon is the baby product of a Sauvignon Blanc and a Cab Franc grape, which is so interesting because Sauvignon Blanc is white.
So it's sort of a hybrid, you're saying? Those two types of grapes were mixed in the growing process?
Yes. Somebody in the farming process, they were spliced together. A Cab Franc, which is a black grape, which produces red wine. Sauvignon Blanc, which is a green grape, which produces white wine. They were grafted together to form a grape that picks up notes from each one and became like,
the special.
Fun fact. Okay.
I love it.
So here's our Josh Cab.
How do we best sample this?
I was going to say, I'm such a novice. Yes. I'm just holding this glass of wine right here in front of me.
Yes. So, and before we start, I do want you to know you can dump it after you've tasted it. So if you don't like it. Okay. And a lot of times in the tasting process, you'll see, if you've watched the movie Psalm, they take a sip, they swirl it around their mouth, then they spit. Because as you begin to get that little bit of a buzz, your senses get dulled. So if you're tasting, it's okay to dump. The first time I ever went to the wine country, I'm like, I can't dump. That would be such an insult. It's not. They don't worry about it. I'm like, but that's so wasteful. But I've learned, if I don't love a wine, I dump it. Because it's not worth the buzz, and I want to be able to continue to taste. But life is too short to drink wine that you don't like. So this is a Cabernet Sauvignon. It should be dry. There's probably going to be a little tannin to it. So I believe that not only do we eat with our eyes first, we eat with our sense of smell first. So it adds to the experience if you stop and take a smell.
It smells lovely. It smells like a very typical wine smell to me that I've smelled all my life. It's a very typical wine smell.
Do you get any particular kind of fruit? Any black fruit, any red fruit, any, besides grapes, obviously, that they came from?
Almost a berry? Is there a berry in
I
there?
smell berry. Yeah. I have a friend that says it smells like Easter egg dye to her.
Oh
how
my gosh.
funny.
Red
Is it
wine.
the
Shelley,
vinegar?
our friend Shelley.
All red wines or?
Yeah, in general, wine in general.
Is
But
it
I
the
think
vinegar?
That's so funny.
maybe, but it's also probably because she hasn't had very many. What she did taste she didn't like. I don't know that she's ever really had an experience like this where she could try several things. And so I've always I think of her sometimes when I smell something that's really like candy almost, like candy and vinegar and berries, and I don't know.
When you ask about the berry note, are you saying that they actually put berries into it when they were fermenting it, or you're just
No.
going to taste that?
That's just the natural flavor that comes out of that type of grape. So black fruit is very typical in a Cabernet Sauvignon. So blackberry, black plum.
That's what I'm picking
black
up.
cherry.
Yes.
You'll
Cherry.
often
I was
get
almost
those
going to say a
notes.
cherry. Yes, a black cherry.
Yeah. So see, you're good. Okay, so now take a taste.
Okay.
Give it a little swirl around your mouth. Let it hit all the taste buds.
Oh, Kathy, your face looks sour. You're making a sour face.
I don't like it.
That's okay.
I went ahead and drank it. I know, but I
That's
just
okay.
It has an interesting
cough
aftertaste.
syrup? Is that? Can I say cough syrup?
You can.
can.
Okay, I just
The
that
wine
one was
isn't
not what I thought it
the
was
wine
going to
is not
taste like at
turned.
all. But maybe that
can
is
tell you the
because
wine
at the
is not
same time
turned.
they do use cherry in a lot of cough syrups, and it does have an alcoholic flavor. So I'm not far off there.
No,
but
you're
it really
not.
did have a. Ugh, it kind of sorry.
No,
it kind
it's
of has
okay.
a sweet. It has a sweet note, and just that was
It
not.
does have a little bit of sour and bitter.
It didn't match the smell.
I feel like.
Yeah, that was interesting. Wow.
Agreed. So
What do you taste?
Yes.
What's your education? What do you taste? What are your instincts?
I taste the same black fruit that I smelled. I taste a little bit of a vegetal something that's like a vegetable of some sort, very, very mildly. I don't get any floral
Maybe
notes from
eggplant.
this. I definitely get sugar. I get chemical. I have a weird
Yeah.
palate. I can sniff that
That's
stuff
why I'm
out.
saying cough syrup. I think that's what I was nailing.
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of proud of myself because I had no idea I was going to pick
Yeah.
that up. But maybe I have been taking a lot more sugar out of my palate, and I really picked up on that.
You did. You
did.
did. And do I have anything super
I was gonna
salty?
say, do
on
we just
the-
do a little bit of that salt and then drink it again?
Well, I do have some salt as an experiment for you guys that we can do in the video, or we can do it on the podcast, or we can do both. There are capers here that are kind of salty. So what my next challenge is, find something on the table, and it could be the prosciutto, that is either salty or acidic or like umami.
Okay.
And
yeah,
see, that is prosciutto di Parma.
Okay.
So take a bite of the meat and then try the wine again and see what might change or might not.
okay, I have cleansed my palate with a little bit of this
Prosciutto.
prosciutto. I try to sound like I have the accent or whatever it is. And I'm going prosciutto, and I'm going to try another round of this. Ready? And you're not going to tell me what I'm going to notice the change of. So let's see what I notice.
I think it tastes better.
It made it more palatable. Is exactly what I was going to say.
Yes.
That calmed. That's the word I want to say.
Smoother.
It calmed that chemical sugar down.
It did, because
It did.
you've got the fatty, oily meat
like I'm
plus the umami nature of the meat. So it makes the wine smoother. So it does not accentuate those sweet flavors, and actually it will bring out a little, the salt in the prosciutto to me brings out the natural fruit and helps me overlook the chemical and added sugar that I'm tasting.
I have a very different feeling about it now, post the prosciutto to the wine tasting. That was a cool trick, is what I want to say. I feel like you're the wine magician, and that was a really neat trick.
Now I want you to try it with a piece of Parmesan Reggiano,
Okay.
Okay.
because Parmesan Reggiano is a salty cheese. So there's a nice salty bite to a parm that I think goes really well with the Cabernet, personally.
Okay, that's a funny thing. It actually tastes more like a grape. Isn't that not strange? I want to say that tasted very much like wine to me. It was very pleasant. After either of these bites is much better than having just taken it on its own. Yeah. So already you have me at pairing food with the wine and making it have a whole different feeling in your mouth, taste in your mouth, experience, all of it. I'm a believer.
Yes. And also, fun fact is the Parmesan Reggiano and the Prosciutto di Parma come from the same place in Italy. So the cows and the pigs are eating the same grass. So we're getting, they pair very, very well together. But you don't have the umami from the meat in the cheese. And so instead of overpowering the wine where it's going to tamp down flavors, what the cheese does, you have the salt that just gets rid of some bitterness, gets rid of some acidity, and helps smooth out the wine.
That's really fun.
So
that's
your
enjoyable.
takeaway is you're not going to just open a bottle of Josh to drink while you're watching a movie.
No, I don't. In fact, I really must say, after listening to you today, I have very little desire to just drink wine for the sake of drinking wine. And there probably are people who still do that, but you've absolutely piqued my interest in finding ways to taste it along with food. So I think I will pair it with food for a time. I may come back around to something else and come back for class level 2 at some point where you just drink wine. But right now I'm going to take on the challenge of, and I'm probably going to get texts and calls. Carleen, I'm about to eat this. What sort of wine would you order? And I'm going to go from there.
Fun.
So, thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
I definitely will be eating when I'm drinking Josh for the next foreseeable future. I've never really disliked it, but man, I tasted a big difference between just drinking it on its own before versus, which I know that I love prosciutto and Parmesan. I mean, I knew that I loved those foods, and I've often had Cabernet with them, you know, just not knowing, but knew that I liked it together. But yeah, that's a game changer.
Yes. Also, sweet foods will, if you ever notice, like if you've eaten dessert and a soda, they don't taste good together at all because it makes the soda not taste sweet enough.
So you have like 2 of my favorite chocolates on the table.
So what's going to happen should we try that?
Yes, because Cabernet Sauvignon and dark chocolate are a classic combo. So I have some dark and
I'm having intense dark.
I have some sea salt caramel. So this is going to be sweeter because it's milk chocolate and caramel.
I'm gonna try that.
But it's got some sea salt in it to help balance it out.
You do the dark chocolate, and I'm going to do the sea salt caramel.
Also make a big difference, and will bring out should bring out completely different flavors in the wine.
That was very sweet. I don't eat milk chocolate a lot anymore. That was a very sweet chocolate.
I would suspect this wine is probably going to taste better with the dark, but it's an interesting experiment to see.
Okay, here goes. Blech. Oh gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! That's like cough syrup times 10. You just made it almost. Oh my! That was awful.
Kathy, sip some water and try it with the.
Okay, we're gonna try the dark chocolate. Okay, you tell about your experience.
Well, I really like dark chocolate, and the bitterness of it, kind of like I enjoy the bitterness of coffee. And so it really complements it. You can taste the sweeter flavors of the wine, but it doesn't taste that sugary, chemical-y sugar taste, soury thing that I tasted originally. It does. It tastes smooth and lovely. And
I'm looking very forward to it.
I think you're going to like it.
Go. Yes. So the takeaway for that is if you're out and you're drinking a red like this and it comes time for dessert, you're not going to order the lemon pie or the coconut pie or something that's really sweet. You're going to go for, do they have like a chocolate torte, something dark chocolate?
Tiramisu. Yes. That did take it back over to the wine, but I'm going to say right now that I almost don't want dessert. I know that sounds crazy because I'm a total dessert-aholic. But if I'm pairing my wine, it's making all my food robust. And now I'm starting to see why I think Italians, when they go to dessert time, they go to a little espresso. They go to more of a coffee drink or something because it's going to pair so nicely with that sugary taste. So
or sometimes they'll do like a limoncello aperitif, like just a tiny little shot.
Now I see, oh my word.
And there are some sweet wines that go well with dessert. Port wines that are fortified go well with dessert. Interestingly, if you want to pair up complementary flavors like this Sauvignon, this is a Pinot Grigio, I'm so sorry. If you have a Sauvignon Blanc that's got a lot of citrus note and there's a lemon icebox pie or a lemon square, those two things are going to complement because the wine is dry and the citrus notes are going to complement each other. So there are wines and there are dessert wines. There are late harvest wines that are sweet that will go better with. A dry red is usually not going to go well with
I believe you.
Super sweet dessert. Or like, a milk
but now
chocolate.
I understand. Here's what I want to say. Now, as a very novice wine drinker, taster, put them all together, you have absolutely given me a deep education in a short amount of time to know what I'm doing at a table where wine is offered now with my food. So thank you so much for that.
So welcome.
So I know you have much more for us to explore, and we're going to do that. Would you like to share where our friends that listen to the podcast can go explore more with you on your social media?
Yes, and I'm just starting it, so there's not a lot of content yet, but it is to come. I'm kind of getting it in the hopper and organizing it, and it's going to be at Carleen's Cellar, and I have carleencellar.com that I will also have the wine tools and nerdy things that I like to have, my favorite glassware, things like that people can see, ooh, what fun tools help me preserve the life of my wine or help open my wine up. Should I decant? Should I not decant? If I do, what's a great decanter? Things like that.
So if I can't text you, I can go to your website and educate myself and know what wine to choose to make my meal lovely.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I have no doubt, as you did before the last time you were a guest, you're going to send me a link that I can drop into show notes to make it very accessible.
Yes, I will.
Anything else you want to share before we dig in and wrap this up?
No, thank you. This has been super fun.
Thank you so much. You have made the idea of finding a healthy wine a very fun journey for me now.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. So fun.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/celebratingwomenpodcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women podcast has been presented by Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast.
Hey guys, it's Mandee. Have you been struggling to lose those extra pounds? Oh, I know. I have totally been there. An extra, 15 to 20 pounds can totally creep up on you in perimenopause. Or at least it has with me. And I think I found it early. I hope it's not happening to you. But if it is, I've got the solution. You can lose up to 15 pounds in 8 days with an incredible product line that I found and I want to share with you. Get a custom product recommendation with a complimentary wellness screening in the show notes. Just click Zing with Mandee.